All right, we are back with a new episode of movie reviews, and this time we're reviewing The Trial of the Chicago Seven, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin. Um, for some of you who may not know the tremendous cast of this movie, we have actors that include Sacha Baron Cohen, Eddie Redmayne, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, Jeremy Strong, Mark Rylance, Frank Langella. I think I pronounced his name wrong. Sorry for him, but and some more great actors. But before we really get into the whole film, we want to introduce our newest member of the crew, Ian. So give a little round of applause for Ian. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in?
Sure, sure. All right. So I'm Ian. I am a fellow film enthusiast. I've been in Ithaca, where I'm on the same major as Nick here, and I presume you as well.
Yeah.
Where we're all in film, we're all looking at this kind of stuff. So same interests. And other than that, I don't know, do a little bit of photography here and there, but yeah, mostly a film guy. So.
Awesome. So now that we have that intro, let's get right into it. And we're going to start off with talking about some of the acting performances. Now, I know some of you guys think there are some possible Oscar noms coming for this film. So, Nick, why don't we have you jump in and just give us your thoughts on the acting as a whole and who stood out to you the most?
Right. So, big ensemble. A lot of there's some like few newcomers that like I've been looking through, but there's a lot of like people who've been around for a while. Frank Langella was in Superman Returns. Michael Keaton's part of the cast, Batman. Jeremy Strong and Yaya just both recently won Emmys. And Sacha Baron Cohen, Eddie Redmayne, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, even John Carroll Lynch have been around in a bunch of films. Zodiac, Fantastic Beasts, Dark Looper for Gordon-Levitt. So a very strong and established cast all around. And I think first off, before we even get to Oscar noms, I know the Screen Actors Guild awards like best ensembles. I think this is definitely a nominee guaranteed. Like just the scenes where they're all like playing off each other. The first scene when Eddie, like at the beginning of the trial, when Eddie Redmayne is kind of like, "What are we doing here?" and like him, Sacha Baron Cohen, and Jeremy Strong are just going back and forth. And later on, when right after John Carroll Lynch gets arrested for punching the guard and they're arguing again at the house, like just great chemistry and all overall, and just great like back and forth. And part of that, and we'll get into this later, but part of that is definitely Sorkin's writing, but it's also definitely for sure the cast. Um, any ones who stood out to me, I think Yaya as Black Panther Party co-founder Bobby Seale, Eddie Redmayne as protest organizer Tom Hayden, and then Sacha Baron Cohen and Jeremy Strong as hippie organizers Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. I think those were kind of the core standouts for me, especially Yaya. I'm a huge fan of the guy ever since, well, first with Aquaman and then most recently with HBO's Watchmen. And I think he does a really good job. He was definitely, for a while there, one of the more dynamic presences, especially since his character's like always arguing with the judge and he's always like getting frustrated. And that's the scene where Franklin Jella straight up like gags him. I was like in utter shock just because it was like I was like this has to be real because there's no way Sorkin would dramatize like such an event. And he I don't know, Yali just carries that like that charisma, that ferocity, and that like just power really well. And I kind of wish he had more to do with the cast, but at the same time, because of the history behind his like Bobby Seale's role in the trial, he's not as connected. I'm also kind of a little sad that he kind of like dipped after a certain point in the film just because I wanted to see him more, but that's how the history went. Redmayne as Tom Hayden. I mean, I just love Eddie Redmayne, so I think he was pretty cool as Tom Hayden, especially that last scene with Mark Rylance when they play Eddie Redmayne's tape. And then Cohen and Strong were just ridiculous as Abby and Jerry. These guys were absolute like riot to watch. I think also especially Jeremy Strong, in particular, especially during that first riot scene where he's like trying to calm everyone down and then he's like trying to like fight his way out. I think that was very powerful. I like, for me, those are the standouts. Frank Langella did great as the jerk of a judge, and it was nice to see Joseph Gordon-Levitt again. I can't remember the last time I saw him. It's been a few years, so it's good. It's great to see him back. Back having work. As for Oscar as potential Oscar nominees, again, I have no idea who else will be nominated other than like Delroy Lindo from Da 5 Bloods. I mean, depending on who else is nominated, I could see, I don't know, Yaya getting nominated in like a supporting role. I don't know if he would win, but again, it just depends on who else is nominated. Um, I feel it's kind of like a Christian Bale, Ford v Ferrari situation where I think his role would have been Oscar nominated if the supporting actor race wasn't as tight as it was. Um, but other than that, like a really strong cast, a really enjoyable set of people. It's nice to see like names like Redmayne and Levitt and Yaya like just get out into the spotlight more. That's about all I have.
Yeah, definitely. Ian, do you want to give us your thoughts on the acting performances through the film?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, a lot of what Nick said, I agree with, and like we have seen a lot of these names before, and I remember like Eddie, for example, as Tom Hayden. Like seeing him at first, I was like, "Where have I seen him before?" It was like, "Oh, okay, so he's from Fantastic, Creatures and all that stuff." And I don't know. There's a lot of like returning faces in this that I thought was really cool. One acting like moment that I thought was pretty good was what Mark Rylance was doing with William Kunstler. Like there are a few moments in the actual trial where you see him just lose his composure, but I think he does a really good job of having subtle moments where his body language conveys he's irritated, but he's not letting it out until it finally builds up until he gets one of his other in contempt of courts, which he ended up with 26 in the real world, which is just insane. But I think he did a really good job with just body language and stuff like that. Um, Again, I think Tom Hayden with Eddie Redmayne doing that there too. It's the same idea where they both kind of played their cool, and they had moments where they really kind of seemed like they were being respectful and they were trying to be respectful of the court and the judge. Um, but then you have the other things where we see the backstory behind the tape recording, and he really kind of loses his cool there. And even though he didn't say, um, he didn't want to say, well, let's let their blood spill across the streets, and wanted to say our blood across the streets. Um, it was still him kind of losing his cool and otherwise in a situation where he would have been a lot calmer. So I think they did a really good job playing around with like the extremes of people's emotions.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think some of the notable things for me were one, Yaya, he acts a lot of the times as the audience, is what I noticed. And that he's the guy saying like, this is completely outrageous. Like he's saying it aloud. He's saying what everyone who's watching the movie and everyone who's in that courtroom is thinking. My thing about his performance is that it's great, but there's really just not enough of a performance to do there. He's just not quite given enough to do other than basically yelling at the judge every 5 minutes. And what I will say though is he invigorates the film and he keeps it going, because this is a film that we'll get into later about the writing aspect of it, but it needs someone like Yaya to keep invigorating it, being so set in one location. The other person is Sacha Baron Cohen. I think he is fantastic in this film as Abby Hoffman, not to be confused with Judge Hoffman, but I think he could be nominated. I think the only thing that might stand in his way is Borat, but but I thought he was really fantastic in this role, especially in the third act of the film. I think there's this humanization of him that you kind of didn't get very purposefully, as we'll talk more about the writing and how the writing plays into the acting in our next segment of this. But I thought Sacha Baron Cohen was amazing. Jeremy Strong, I didn't even realize it was him until after the film and I saw the credits. I was like, that's no way. How did I miss that? Like, I'm like, oh, I can totally see it's him now. And same thing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I was really happy to see him. I haven't seen him in years, but everything he's in, I'm like, yes, I love this guy. And then he's like, where'd he go? He's just, I can't find him. And now he's back with this and Project Power. And so I was excited to see him again. But those are our general thoughts on the acting in this film. We'll get more into it at the end when we can kind of talk about everything as a whole. But we're going to move on to writing, and we're going to mesh in directing with that. So, Nick, do you want to go first and kind of give your thoughts on the two?
Yeah, I got it. So this is an Aaron Sorkin film, meaning that the way this film is written is very specific. If you've seen Social Network, if you've seen Moneyball, A Few Good Men, there's a specific tempo to Sorkin dialogue, and it's all present here. If I had a nickel every time I rewinded a portion just to hear an exchange again, there's so many like witty and like outrageous lines, like the gag about how there were two Hoffmans in the room and Abby Hoffman is like, "Father, no." First off, that's apparently the actual exchange. He said something along those lines, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "What?" I was like, "Okay." Like I'm just so caught off guard by like the sheer outrageousness of it, but one, it fit, Sacha Baron Cohen's character so well, and it was just like another moment of just like crazy. That whole opening sequence when Joseph Gordon-Levitt was trying to like get his opening statement out, and there were like 5 different interruptions for like bizarre reasons. I was like, what's going on? This is just typical. It's like just classic like Sorkin dialogue. Gosh, there's so many scenes Sorkin does so well in a courtroom setting. I highly recommend A Few Good Men if you haven't seen it already. With Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, and just a lot of the character building between like this massive cast just occurs with Sorkin's writing. Another scene that I like to think of is when Michael Keaton first shows up, and like there's the 2 government guys in the back. There's Mark Rylance and his like second in command, and there's Michael Keaton, and there's like a back and forth between all 5 of them, and it all ends with Michael Keaton going, "I just wanted the 2 guys in the back here for when I said like, when do you need me in court?" Like build up to moments like witty, sarcastic moments like that is like just the moments I really, really adore from Aaron Sorkin. And I know I've been glimpsing some reviews on Letterboxd, and people have been throwing the words sanctimonious and like self-righteous about. And I mean, like, I could see why people would choose to label it that way, but I mean, given like the subject matter, also given just, you know, I don't think it's necessarily sanctimonious. I think it's more of the way, I think it's more the subject matter people took issue with. Because like it's the same dialogue we saw from Social Network, it's the same dialogue from Moneyball, and I feel even then like sanctimonious, like it means like an assumed like higher moral position, but you see that played out in different ways, like in the writing when you see like Eddie Redmayne arguing with Abby Hoffman about like their different approaches to protesting, like stuff like that. You see different philosophies brought up, you see different like perspectives brought up, and I think the way Sorkin was able to like manage all that and like bring everything together, even something so much as John Carroll Lynch like punching the guy and him being like, "Oh my god, like I hit him," even when he told his son at the beginning do not commit violence. All just little moments like that, like there's like payoffs and then there are references, and just very like brilliant writing as in means of bringing the story forward, and also just helping build the character relationships between everyone. I think for sure Cohen and Strong got some of the funniest and most outrageous lines. Um, just the scene where they showed up in judges' robes and then they took them off and they had cop uniforms. I was like, oh, the sheer audacity. I was like, that's so great. That's awesome. That's and stuff with like the last thing I'll say, like Yaya's introduction scene where he's like, Martin's dead, Bobby's dead, Jesus is dead. He's like, I'm gonna try something else. It's like you get a sense for who they are in that moment. It just clips along at such a great pace. And we're meshing this with directing, right? Is that
Yeah, we are.
Okay, I'll say just for directing, the two moments that I'll say were standout moments was when Yaya was gagged and the first riot. The way that was edited and the way that was all built up to the riot, just to have like the two like the people on the stand talking, and to have like Abby Hoffman like giving his talking to the college kids or whatever, and then the actual thing, to have that all crisscross. And the moment when they were all like someone shouted and then someone shouted, and then you cut to the actual riot and all hell breaks loose. That was such a perfectly executed moment for me, and a perfect way of like building up to that. And for when Yaya was gagged, like that was such a great suspenseful moment. Like the judge said, he was like, deal with him as you should. And at first I was in shock, because I was like, he basically like he communicated the order to go beat this guy up in the back, and everyone would just have to sit there and deal with it. And then just the build up to seeing him like gagged and tied up, and like the reactions after, that was such an well executed moment. And there's a lot of that repeated throughout, but those, the way those were handled, I just want to highlight that because it just helped kept the pacing going. It helped kept like the momentum and the stakes going. So um pretty like all handled really well overall.
Ian, do you want to touch on your thoughts on the writing and directing?
Yeah, for sure. Just to jump off of like one of the last things you said, Nick, I was going to bring up the riot scene where, yeah, I like the idea of like cutting in between everything and having it like Abby's talking about what's about to happen. And so then they said, and then the other person says, well, they said this. Someone says, let's rush the hill. But I liked how in that scene, kind of again touching on the idea of like having that moral differences, how you have Jerry who's in the midst of all of this, watching this all go down. And there's the woman earlier who's been sporting that American flag the entire time while the frat boys have been harassing her. And they pull her down and start to basically assault her. And you would expect, you know, okay, the guy, you would think that the person part of the riot, normally in a riot, you would think, oh, they're going to be like, they might be the aggressor in this situation. But it really shows, this writing here shows how Jerry was the one who was stopping the aggression. He was stopping all this. And it shows how, like, especially in riot situations, it's not so black and white. And morals aren't really, you know, cut and dry. And I think that was a really well done scene. Um, to build upon the idea of like directing where you have the cuts between different, you know, scenes. There was the part where at the very beginning when they were introducing all the different groups with Abby and Tom Hayden and Dellinger or Derringer, uh, you had like just these cuts between conversations, and people would say something like, I forget what the exact line was, but the idea was Abby was talking about, well, we respond with violence in kind with, and then Dellinger says to his son, peace. We never do anything violent. We'll never respond with violence. And having those cuts between the different ideologies um, kind of like sewed them all together. And it showed that all these people were coming from the same thing, but not necessarily doing it in the same way. And again, it's kind of a parallelism to the scene where all the groups are asking for permits to go protest. They all kind of had the same interplay of conversations being cut from one to another. And I think that was really cool in showing the differences in the groups that were attending this protest while also highlighting the relationship they had together. So stuff like that I thought was really interesting in the writing and directing.
Yeah, definitely. And jumping off from there, there's a scene, gosh, I can't remember. Well, it's where Michael Keaton takes a stand and he just goes in on the Justice Department and the attorney, what is it, the new attorney general? And it's just heartbreaking. You see him just laying everything out, and then this like fraudulent judge just is like, no, the jury can't hear this. And you're like, what? They're innocent. Like this shows that there's an agenda behind it, and he won't let the jury know. And it's just so frustrating. And when you have, is that the scene where Rylance just slams his
Yeah,
book?
he's like, yeah, because he's yeah, that was like, yeah, that was the book
Yeah.
slam moment.
It's just so heartbreaking. And that scene itself is directed really well. there are some, I do have, you guys have gotten into a lot of the positives I have, so I feel like I'm going to be more critical of the film. I think there are some one shots that frustrated me because I think one shots can take you out of the film if they're not necessary. And I think some of these one shots weren't necessary. And they just felt a little bit out of place. I think some other things to note is there were times where the editing felt a little off. They did edit, like a lot of the editing was great. Anything that was outside of the courtroom I felt was great, and especially the riot and how that was intercut with the trial. But what I will say is that some of the courtroom stuff, just it felt a little bit off, the timing of it. And I think it also came from, there was a lot of shots that just felt like they were coming from the same camera angle, especially on the judge, and it felt like you had kind of already seen it. And it at least for me, it threw me out of the movie a little bit. And then go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump off that real quick. You're talking about like feeling like drawn out. I
Yeah.
think in that same scene you were talking about with Clark, the general, didn't they do like this really weird fade to black at the end that felt like it just kind of left it hanging, and it felt like that scene needed to resolve and it didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100. I felt that 100%.
Okay. I figured
felt,
that's kind of like that kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it just
Sorry,
felt,
continue though.
no problems at all. It's a great point. I mean, it felt really just out of place in the movie. It just didn't feel like that fade to black felt a little weird. I would have
Yeah.
rather had, like a hard cut, but I'm not an editor. I'm not a pro, to be fair. To be fair to them, they have a professional editor who's doing this for its whole lifetime. But that's what stood out to me as far as the like editing and directing stuff. As far as the writing goes, I felt like I could have used a little bit more from Yahya. I wish I had known how to, just like a single scene where it's like, what was he doing in his 4 hours in Chicago? Like, how far, like on the opposite side of town was he when he got arrested, where they were just looking for a way to arrest him?
Yeah, I just want to jump into, now that you brought up the idea of editing, I didn't realize that they were jumping forward in time. Like, do you know, like they were introducing everyone, and then like they cut to John Doman talking with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I was like, oh, the riot happened already. I was like, I thought we were building to the riot. I didn't realize, maybe I missed like, I don't know, a timestamp or whatever, like saying it jumped ahead a year, but that,
I
yeah,
don't think
like,
it
I got thrown up.
said.
Yeah, I got thrown up because I was like, wait, like I didn't realize we were jumping forward. I didn't know like where everyone ended up. And yeah, now that you bring up Yahya too, I was like, there was a major gap in time and where his character was introduced and when he ended up there. So sorry, I just wanted to, now that you brought it up.
Yeah,
It's
and go ahead.
it's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go, keep on.
Continuing on that point of it's like the whole film he's dismissed in the court case, and it feels like he almost gets dismissed in the film's writing itself, which kind of feels like even further a disservice. And I don't know if it like accentuates the idea of what happened, like with him being dismissed all the time and not being heard, or you know what I mean. But
Yeah, I feel like it does in a way, but I feel like it doesn't do justice to him as a character. I think you would feel for him even more if you saw that he wasn't doing anything. He was like literally in Chicago for 4 hours, and just seeing like a little scene where he's either getting arrested and it's like, what is he getting arrested for? I'm confused. Just something that added that extra layer of empathy would have made those scenes, I think, where he's like, I don't have my lawyer present. You can't be trying me right now. And like him wanting to cross-examine witnesses and him being like, this is ridiculous. It would have made you feel just that little bit extra. And I think it would have added that extra depth to the character that I think really could have, like, that's the difference to me between Yahya being in a Oscar caliber role or something that's like, he does great in the little bits that he has, but he just doesn't quite have enough to be nominated for it. Like that's that small difference. And like, to be fair, we're nitpicking here, right? But like that's part of the game. When you love a movie, you have to, like, you can't just be shilling it out like you're a Disney, like a Disney shill, as everyone decides to call it. Like, it's just, it kind of is what it is. And that part was frustrating to me. Yeah, but I think that kind of covers our writing and directing thoughts. So yeah, go ahead.
I did want to say one more thing that I just thought of. I thought it was interesting with the directing, how there were clips from the actual events and riots brought in. It reminds me a bit of uh, Jojo Rabbit, like a film like that, where they bring in like films from the actual point of history.
Mhm.
And I think in terms of it almost aids the writing and the directing, having that connection between what you're actually seeing on screen, what's being directed, and then what actually happened, and seeing how close in relationship they are and how accurate it really is. Like, I think it paints the picture even further and makes it say, oh, this actually happened. But
Yeah,
I just wanted to add that quick.
yeah, that's a fantastic point. And we're gonna move on to our like final thoughts on the film. We'll give a kind of general idea on where it kind of ranks on the 2020 films we've seen before, or up to this point, I should say. So, Nick, let's start with you. What were your overall thoughts on the film? Did you like it? Did you not? Somewhere in between? And where does it kind of rank, or what area is it in for you in films from 2020?
I really enjoyed this film. I think, brief recap of what I said: strong cast, strong writing, and something we haven't really touched on yet thus far, but like the time in which it was released, like coming out, it was released. We're filming October 18th, like 2020. Um, just what has happened this year alone with like the Black Lives Matter protest and the protest against police brutality, and just seeing like just the sheer parallels and timeliness of it, both it scared me, like, because I was just like, oh my god, like this is exactly, this looks like it could have been, this riot looks like it could have happened in this year. And I'm not saying like Aaron Sorkin has like, precognitive vision, or maybe he does, who knows with that guy. But it just, the manner in which it just came out, it just had that extra added layer of impactfulness. And I think like it's a movie that, like, especially with everything that's been happening, again, October 18th, we're like 3 weeks away from election day. Like, I think it's a film everyone could just like watch and like learn something from. And while also still getting a very powerful, like, and just a powerful and entertaining film as well. And yeah, just the fact that they're able to balance such like dark and like intense stuff with like those moments of like comedy, anything Sacha Baron Cohen did, anything, like even the random bits, like the judge like just refusing to say David Dellinger's name the correct way, just little stuff, little moments of levity to help balance it out, that I thought, again, Sorkin, I think, managed to hit a reasonable balance from the get-go. From my 2020 list, as soon as I finished, I put it in my top 3, but after talking about it with you guys, it may drop, I don't know, 1 or 2 spots, just because like I am recalling like, I was going off like the high of like just watching the film and like everything that happened, and I like, it may drop. I think it'll stay in the top 10. There's only a few films left on my watch list for the rest of the year, but it may drop from its current number 3 position. Actually, I have number 4 right now. I have The Invisible Man still above it, but yeah, still I think it's gonna stay in my top 10. I think it's for sure an Oscar frontrunner just for Best Picture, just because this is the type of thing the Academy loves to go for. So yeah, definitely interested to see how this will play out in the award season, and definitely just a good movie to check out for our time.
Yeah. Ian, do you want to give us your thoughts on where it ranks and what your overall thoughts were on the film?
Sure. I mean, overall, I really enjoyed it. Like, when you think of a court case, you don't necessarily think of something that's super exciting.
Mhm.
But this really showcases, like, behind every case, behind every like story like this, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it. And I think film does a really good job. Aaron Sorkin does a great job at showing how charged situations like this can be. And again, bouncing off of what Nick said, definitely came at the right time. I think watching this film in the period of time we're at with everything that's going on really drives home some of the film's messages and some of what's going on in the world today. So I really think that that served well for the film. Um, and as for where I'd rank it, it's definitely near like the top of my list. Like I have seen Jojo Rabbit. I've seen this film. There's a few other ones that like recently I'd gone through, but I would say right now it's definitely like my third or second movie, just because I really enjoyed the editing, the cast, everything. So I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, and go off of that, I think for me, I'm in the same camp. I think there's some stuff that just felt like it wasn't quite where it needed to be, but that didn't stop the film from being insanely entertaining, having great dialogue. Shout out to Jeremy Strong and Sacha Baron Cohen. I think Sacha Baron Cohen should possibly get nominated for an Oscar. I don't know if that's a supporting role or like it's so confusing with these ensemble casts. Who's the like Eddie Redmayne's probably the main protagonist, but you always wonder if it's a Ford v Ferrari thing where it's two main actors roles or if it's supporting actor. But I think he could possibly get a nomination. I thought he was a standout for me in the film, among others. I think the whole thing with Yaya kind of it didn't rub me the right way. I felt like there's just something that needed to be better, and I think that kind of pushes this film down a little bit. And kind of the overall, there are parts of the film where I think it gets a little bit slow in the courtroom, which is kind of the nature of those type of films. But overall, I had a really fun time with this. 100% relevant to what's going on. Almost feels like if they released it a month sooner, it would have felt even more relevant. But I think still it has that relevancy that it really reminds you of how these like even the philosophy stuff of how people with different political views, you can take it that way, and how it's, you know, people are misunderstood and it's complicated and it's not as simple as you would think. But overall, it fits in my top five. I have it at five right now. I have The Invisible Man, Palm Springs, which is somehow still in my top five. I just love that. I adore that film. You Can Fight Me, I don't care. And then The Five Bloods right after it, and Bad Education, and Trial of the Chicago Sevens right there at five. Could move down the six behind the half of it, which I have at six right now. It could move ahead. Um, I'm not quite sure yet. So overall, I really loved the film. I think we all did. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video. Leave a comment down below. What did you think? Do you have a different opinion of the film? Was there something that stood out to you? Do you think any of the actors should or will be nominated for Oscars or other awards? Let us know, and we'll see you next time. Peace.